Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us in the SEPC Virtual Garden for our very first SEPC University Education session of the day. It's not personal, it's generational. This live stream video session is sponsored by Onions 52 and Sabraco International. Joining me is Kristen Urisic Scott of Urisic Label. She is an SEPC board member and a co-chair of the SEPC Education Committee. Kristen, can you give us a sneak peek of what we can expect this morning?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me this morning, Fallon. We're really excited about this first education session. We have Patrick Kelly of the Produce Industry podcast who's going to be talking to us about how different generations can work together to thrive in the workplace and in general everyday life. We also have panelists, one from each generation. We have Mason Goolsby from Schumann Farms. We have Clark Roper from Piggly Wiggly. We have Dave Verdrager from B&W Classic Quality Growers. Lucretia Parrish from Giorgio Fresh Company. And last but certainly not least, we have Joe McGee from L&M Companies. So we're really excited to get the information from Patrick and then hear some real world expertise from our panelists.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Kristen, and thank you all for joining us in the SCPC Virtual Garden. It looks like everyone is ready to get started, so I will hand it over to Kristen and stay tuned for more.
Thank you so much. My name is Kristen Urisic Scott. I am a SEPC board member as well as your education co-chair. We're so excited to have you all here this morning with us for our first session. It's not personal, it's generational. First, I'm going to take a few minutes to thank our sponsors, who without them, none of this would be possible. The education session sponsors for today are B&W Quality Growers, Birch Farms, Florida Classic Growers, Keenan Farms, Robinson Fresh, and Vidalia Sweet Produce. Our education session refreshment area, so if you haven't been outside, all your coffee and goodies this morning, is Aco Farms, Fowler Farms, Fresh Innovations California, National Mango Board, Tasty Fruity International, Woodbridge Sales and Marketing, and WP Produce. Let's give them a round of applause. So of course, it's very important to the SEPC to keep in mind all the antitrust reminders that we have to follow throughout this entire event. So throughout today's session, we'll be keeping that top of mind, as well as if you have conversations on the show floor, out in the lobby, things of that nature. So go ahead and take a look up on the screen to read through the antitrust reminder. And without further ado, I'm here to introduce Patrick Kelly, our moderator and speaker for this session. Patrick Kelly is a successful entrepreneur, speaker, and strategist in the produce and supply chain industry. For more than 15 years, Patrick has been dedicated to growing supply chains for produce partners around the world, becoming the class of 2015's Young and Smart Leaders on the Rise, Top 40 Under 40, and a young entrepreneur making better deals for growers. He has dedicated his work to learning and leading all generations to work and thrive together. Let's welcome Patrick to the stage.
Is this on? Welcome, everybody. It is, I will say it's good to be back. I mean, I think we went through a good 2020 of not being together, so let's give a round of applause for SEPC and putting this together. I'm excited to be back. I'm excited to be talking about all the generations. Heck, when I had this concept of starting this book, it was a mere plane ride over to China and really sitting next to a gentleman that I had no idea. I had no idea who he was or what he did, but given a little push and a little opportunity, anything can happen. So let's get into what we're talking about today. Our panelists, oh, hold on, excuse me. All right, so let me introduce myself before our panelists. So my name is Patrick Kelly. I'm a young entrepreneur. I am a strategist in the supply chain and produce industry. I'm an author, and I am the podcast host of the Produce Industry Podcast. So over a year ago, we had a fun idea to start a podcast to deliver dynamite content to the industry, and that's what we have done. And guess what? Through that time period, we have got to reach all generations up here on stage. That's right, all of them. In life and in work, everyone. So it's not just about going to work anymore and seeing your counterpart. It's about what you do out of work. It's about the life you live. It's about the cultures that we're bringing on and into our organizations, right? That's what it's about. So I love the produce industry, everyone. I'm passionate about it. I love eating my fruits. I love eating my vegetables. And that's just what I think should be done. I think we should all have a little bit of fruit and vegetables in our life. So thank you all again for coming and seeing what the millennial boom has to offer. So let's get into our dynamite panelists today, because I've had the pleasure of knowing a few of them over the years and meeting them for this discussion today. All right, so we got to give credit where credit is due, and we're going to start out with the Gen Zs. All right, they're the newest into the workforce. We have Mason Goolsby. I love this. The new kid on produce. She is literally new kids on the block, everyone, if we want to take a real look at what she's doing. And Mason joined the Schumann Farms team as marketing coordinator in January of 2020. Tough year to start little marketing, huh, Mason? So Mason attended Southern Exposure in 2019 as part of the STARS program. So welcome, Mason. Glad to have you on the panel today. Next. We have, I would say, a little bit of a long-term colleague of mine, millennial, everyone. We have a little bit of, I would say, camaraderie and competitiveness in us. Mr. Clark Roper of Piggly Wiggly, everyone. Now, senior produce buyer, where he oversees the supply chain, marketing, and sales of commodities, fruits, and vegetables for Piggly Wiggly, retail grocery chain. Clark Roper, welcome, sir. All right, next, we've got our Gen X. They've been called the lost generation. We're going to find out today. We have Mr. Dave Verdrager. Now, Dave was born and raised in Long Island, New York. So he told me he has some comebacks, he's been writing some notes, and he's got a few things to say today about what Generation X has to offer. So after graduating from culinary school in 2003, Dave moved to Manhattan to continue developing his culinary skills. Now, Dave joined B&M in March of 2017, everybody, where he currently manages all Eastern U.S. ops. So, Dave, welcome, sir. Great to have you. Gen X, everyone. Next, the VP of Southeast Sales of Giorgio Fresh Mushrooms Company, Lucretia Paris. She is our baby boomer, everybody. That's right. Now, when we talk about the millennial boom, we talked about the two largest generations. We're going to talk a little bit about that and where the baby boomers will fit in by 2026. Now, Lucretia, she started selling mushrooms when there were 3 pre-packed sizes available in the Southeast. No one had ever heard of the portobello mushroom, and all orders received via the phone. Maybe fax too, huh, Lucretia?
That was later.
Oh, later. So, Lucretia, everybody, let's welcome Lucretia Parrish. And last, we have our silent generation. Now, this generation, smaller and smaller as it's getting, but so rich in knowledge. We have Mr. Joe McGee. Now, Joe McGee spent his early childhood on a small family farm in Johnson County, NC. He learned the value of hard work at an early life. I bet real early, Joe. And you know what? A lot of his skills come from working with his father's wholesale company in the mornings before school and attending football practice after school. Joe had a full-time job, well, 2 full-time jobs, just growing up as being a kid and helping in the produce industry. So let's welcome Joe McGee, everyone, our silent generation. All right, so does everybody have their workbook? We printed these workbooks to have a little bit of engagement throughout the session. We want you to be involved and learn something today, everyone. Each one of these panelists have something great to contribute to the produce and supply chain industry, and we're going to prove it to you today. So pull out that workbook as we go through, and when we ask the panelists questions, that is your time to go ahead and fill that workbook out and start to engage on how you are going to approach this afternoon and even tomorrow and the future with different generations. So pull out that workbook, date it, sign it, start coloring in it, draw on it. Just please use the workbook. All right, so what are we talking about here? It's interesting. So what is the millennial boom, which we are going to cover? Okay, very quick, very swift. We're also going to talk about the generations 101. We're going to break down each generation and what really dignified and set your life. I mean, give a couple key comments of what happened and what set you in place to start looking and thinking the way you do business and conduct your life. So we're going to go a little bit about some of those defining moments. Then we're going to talk a little bit about why the heck does this even matter? You're thinking about it going, what does this even matter? It matters. We're going to find out why. How each generation approaches work. In my book, we talk about millennial wiring. Millennials have a different way of looking at things. We'll talk about that, but every generation has a little bit of wiring in them. They do things a little bit differently, conduct themselves in a way to make themselves stand out or go along with the flow. And last but not least, I'm going to tell you a little story about change and how change is a good thing. All right, so what is the millennial boom? First of all, we're just going to pray that the speakers are going to work on presentation.
Over millions of American millennials and boomers are trying to work together despite their massive differences. She might be smiling on the outside, but on the inside, she is very tired of dealing with her boomer boss. Millennials are booming and outnumbering the boomer generation, but boomers aren't going away anytime soon. Let us help learn about how boomers and millennials can learn to respect each other. Hans Finzel and Patrick Kelly are helping millennials and boomers around the globe thrive together in life and work. So come join the boom. Millennial Boom Now.
So that's fantastic. It gives you a good overview of the millennial boom. And so what is the millennial boom? Well, it might just be the sound of warfare across the two largest generations in America today. Now, when we wrote this book, boomers numbered 76 million in population, and millennials, we were at 82 million. Wow, the largest generations. And we thought to ourselves, could they actually respect each other? Could a millennial go in to a baby boomer and tell them what to do and request that kind of respect and say, I got this, I'm going to do it this way? We weren't sure, but we figured if we crossed those lines and we figured out a way to thrive together, and that's what we're here to talk about, is thriving in life and work, everyone. That's what it is about. Hans and I saw the perfect opportunity, and that's what we did. We came together as a baby boomer and a millennial. That's why we have the Gen X in the middle. We separate those two a little bit. But now we look into 2021, and we realize it's not about just two generations being as large as can be. I see 5 generations throughout the audience today that are working in the produce and supply chain industry. This smile is a good smile for me because that makes me happy. It makes me understand that we are working together. We just have to find a way to collectively work harder together. We have to thrive in and out of work because that's what's going to make the difference. Not just saying you care, but actually care. So let's talk and get a real symbolic look at who these generations are. Because some of these companies that I've met today and some of the panelists, they're new companies to me that I met here in the produce and supply chain industry. So who can we relate to? Let's show some relatable people that are going to relate to Mr. Joe here, Lucretia, Dave, Clark, and Mason. So here we go. The Generations 101, everyone. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about some defining moments. Let's talk about some personal values. So we start with the silent generation. Mr. Robert De Niro. We see that. Does everybody recognize Robert De Niro? Come on, everybody's got to recognize. Okay, there's like half of you lying. No, none of you raised your hand. Come on. So Robert De Niro, we all know Robert De Niro. Silent generation. I think he was born just roughly a little bit about 1941 to 43, I believe Mr. De Niro was born. And you look at these things and go, wait a minute. If this guy's still pumping out good movies and directing good films, we should be able to learn something from them. We should be able to take that notch and say, wow, what can we see? Now, I grabbed Robert De Niro for a great example for one reason. He portrayed this boomer character in a movie called, does anybody know? Anne Hathaway. Okay? And it was really great. I'm going to leave that lingering for everybody because I want you to look it up because I think you need to watch this movie. We're going to circle back at the end. You're going to get the name of it, but I'm going to see, because it's going to be a question I'm going to ask, see who looked it up. The Intern. She already got it. She pumped it out. So The Intern. And you would think about it, this generation was able to come in and work with another generation as an intern. We believe that the younger generation coming up should always be the intern. Never the mentor. Never the person leading. So let's look at some of these defining moments as we talk about the silent generation. What did they go through? They went through the Great Depression. They went through World War II. How did that feel? How do you think that made you feel? Workplace loyalty. Some of these businesses that we know that are here today, right, Joe? The silent generation started as a simple farming company, possibly just buying some land and putting a seed, the whole buying a warehouse, doing logistics, integrating with your customer. I think that probably came later, didn't it, Joe? A little bit later. Well, they moved to the burbs. That's always a funny one I love to talk about. Hans talks about it all the time. There was a set path for the silent generation. It wasn't clear, but it was get married. It was going to war. It was coming back. It was having babies, hence the baby boomers, and living a life that they tried to start before all of these things happened, right? There was events that happened. We had an event last year, everyone. Create a little bit of havoc in our industry, just a little bit. So these are things that are starting to define us. Let's go to the baby boomers. Born between 1946 and 1964, Meryl Streep. Everybody know Meryl Streep? Another actress. Yeah, again, everybody knows. We know these people, right? But now we're comparing them with our counterparts here. We're trying to get a real look at people that are still producing that we see in the public eye, but we might not see these people that are behind the scenes of our everyday lives producing food. Let's be real here, everyone. The globe. That's what the produce and supply chain industry does. We serve food to people. If that doesn't hit home for you, I don't know what does. So, Meryl Streep. Wow. They went through Vietnam. The moon landing. Is that real? Civil rights. Experimental innovators. Oh, we saw a lot of those from the baby boomers. Great companies that we see that are still standing today. We know some of those tech companies that are out there. Everybody has the phone out. We know they do. These are companies that were started in a time that needed innovation, right? We needed something to progress, to move to the next way of doing business, the next way of thinking, all right? Hardworking, oh gosh, baby boomers, Lucretia, you are the hardest working generation I know. Trust me, I know. My dad tells me every day, everyone, so every single day. Hardest working generation. And then the personal computers came out. Lucretia, and even John, if we keep moving down the timeline, went from a way of phone calls only, faxes, right? Then these personal computers. I remember Hans told me, he said, you should have seen the look on my boss's face when I went up to him in 1988 and asked for my first personal computer. They were like, who do you think you are? Now, when we go sign into a job, they're like, here's your laptop, here's your phone, do not leave home without it. You're like, oh. They had to adapt to this. Well, we're moving down the line. We got Gen X. We got them. let's see, born between 1965 and 1979. Good year. Good year. Good year. I know that there's a lot of good Gen Xers out there. They experienced things like fall of the Berlin Wall, okay? The Gulf War. Think about some of these things. Independent free agents. Those were contractors. Back in the days, that's when really contractors and that name broker became about. Look what's happening here. You see where we're going? You see the change? You see what's happening? Well, they got to experience MTV. AIDS awareness was huge. We all knew about that. We all of a sudden started seeing commercials everywhere. Cell phones. And when I mean cell phones, everybody, if you were a Gen Z like Mason, she might have seen this or might not. My dad used to have to put this wire on the top of his car. He used to screw it in, Mason. He used to come over and say, boys, who's getting on the bumper? I was like, what? He's like, I got to screw the antenna in. And we're like, oh my gosh, this is the coolest thing ever. We're screwing in an antenna to a Wagoneer. That's what we're doing, right? So these are things that now came about, right, Dave? I mean, this is things that as your career and you started moving, you started getting to play with some of these newer toys. You got the cell phone. It was a block, right? Called the Zach Morris phone. That's my how I'm going to really put those two together. But you remember that, right?
Sure.
And those were kind of defining moments on how you worked and how you proceeded in your personal life. This train just keeps on moving. And then the millennials. I admit it. Clark and I are millennials. You didn't know that. I know. It's the way we dress. It's the way we act. I know you thought we were younger. I get it. So look at us. 1980 to 2000, a 20-year time stamp. Okay? The largest generation in history today, the millennials. 82 million in population. Went through the 9/11 attacks. I remember watching that on my TV in the corner in Miss Summerlin's HTML class when I was in about 10th or 11th grade. I 100% remember it. Watching the second plane hit the tower. I remember. That defined us a little bit, didn't it, Clark?
A little bit.
Remember being in school and them telling us we were on lockdown over an accident? We didn't know what was happening. It made us think about a lot of things. It made us think about traveling. It made us think about really some important things in our life at that time. Well, and then we have diversity, social freaking everything, everyone. I know some of you hate it. We got our phones. I actually left mine on the table. But we got them all the time. We have social this, social that. And guess what? It's just another way of us being us and you being you and just embracing a new technology, okay? Social everything is the way to go. It's heck, it's what we wanted when someone said I remember being back in 8th grade or 9th grade and them saying, get on Netscape Navigator and look this up. And you know what happened? You couldn't find anything. So we wanted stuff now. We were like, we need this now. We want to click that button and we want that one click done and get it to us. That's what we were raised to say, raised to do. Wow. These changes are going further and further. So let's go to our Gen Z. So now that's 2000 to 2015. That's Mason down there. Now this generation has been a little bit different because they're raised some by Generation X and some by millennials. So they have a little bit of mix of the old school and the new school, okay? Ages 11 to 20, okay? Now they're optimistic, they have high expectations, mobile everything, everything's on an app, everything's on the go, everything is ready. Boom, 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 let's get this thing now because guess what? That's what society has given them, that's what society has demanded of them, and now they are trying to innovate to keep up with the next generation. Mason, does that sound like you over there?
Well, I was telling them earlier, I actually identify as a silver.
Oh!
Somewhere on the cusp. So Clark and I might have a good bit in common.
Oh, that's perfect. You know, and there's a lot of names out there, everyone. There's a lot of names. I've heard of Xennials. I've heard of everybody wants to jump ship on their generation nowadays. They're like, you know what? We're just going to. I don't like what those millennials are doing. I'm going to get off, and I'm going to be an Xennial. Okay, well, you can't do that. We're not going to let you do that. So a couple people, and then we'll move on to our panelists. get some questions, get some workbooks going. So we have Robert De Niro as the silent Gen, Meryl Streep as the baby boomer. I forgot to say the rest. Gen X, Leo DiCaprio. We have our millennial Taylor Swift and our Gen Z, Billie Eilish. So all celebrities doing their thing, very respected in their careers as well, too. From someone that's all the way down to the age of 20 years old, all the way up to over 80 years old, still respected in life and work. So let's start with our panelists. So Mason, let's start on this because I believe that now it's time for you to answer. We gave some defining moments as a Gen Z, as all of these generations, right? So as these defining moments, we talked about it. Tell me about some of the defining moments as a Gen Z that you've experienced growing up and then being in produce and supply chain.
I would say from a produce standpoint, driving innovation, sustainability, and also shared giving. I think that's something that my generation as well as millennials have really pushed for, and constantly challenging companies to evolve and innovate, whether it's plastics and packaging or creating new charitable giving programs. And so I think that's something that we're constantly pushing and challenging companies to do more and give more. And then just personally, I guess it's not an achievement of my generation because most of my generation is still in, school. But something that's kind of defined my generation would have to be the invention of the smartphone. We do stuff completely different from, scanning documents. We take pictures and email them, whereas some older generations might scan and fax. So just constantly, technology has been, we've grown up with it, whereas others have learned to adapt and learned as they go. It's been a part of my life since I was, 6, 7 years old. So
It's powerful, because even my kids, the next generation, we give them an iPad, we give them these tablets now. And regardless if you want to give them an actual device like an Apple, there's still, every kid device is something out there that has a device, has a screen. That's what we as society are really giving our children. So now, I want to fast forward though, okay? We're going to go from Gen Z straight to silent, okay? So Joe, the same question for you. So you heard Mason and talked about the smartphone and how it's in their everyday lives and all the changes that were demanded by her. So these defining moments that we talked about, tell me a little bit about some of the defining moments. And do you concur with some of the ones that were on screen?
Well, the defining moments to me are things that kind of probably evolve over time. I was started out with my biggest influence was probably my father. He never finished the 3rd grade, and he got into the business, and he had very simple philosophy. You outworked your competition. That was it, regardless. So things like that kind of evolved, and over the time, it was more like a learning experience from really generation to generation. I think as far as L&M is concerned, over the years we have been fortunate enough to have a good mix of older people and younger people, and they have gotten along and listened to one another and respected one another. And I think that's what it takes, a lot of respect and listening and learning.
I agree. Active listening.
Active
Listening, everyone. We all know what that is. I've been told it many times. It was a personal development, on my personal development plan one year, because it's tough. We all have to know where our weaknesses are, right? Active listening, a good amount of us do not do. We listen. Trust me. There's a lot of you listening right now. I believe it. And there's a few of you active listening. Thank you. We appreciate that. So let's move back and go to our millennial Clark defining moments. I know we've shared some of these together. What do you think and how do you feel? What's defined you coming up as the millennial?
Yeah, so I mean, there's tons of things that have happened as we've grown up that have defined the way we see the world. I mean, you mentioned 9/11. How could that not have a massive impact on the way you see things? I mean, that was right in the time where, you know, our family was going to start to travel, and, you know, the way we look at airplanes and safety is completely different forever, you know, so incredibly defining there. But when I was reflecting on this question, I was thinking about actually the pandemic this last year, and that's the first major thing that's happened for me as a decision maker, as a head of household, right? So this is the first major thing that's changed in my world that I've had to kind of see through the eyes of how does this not only affect me, but now, you know, I'm together with my wife making decisions for our family and what we're going to do next and what that looks like. So that's been a big eye-opener for us over the last year.
You hear some of these defining moments. You hear how that could really impact decisions too. You could see it. I can see it. These defining moments really make us look at how we do business and even in our personal lives. You might still be thinking, what do you mean? Well, some people don't want to travel. They used to. 10 years ago, they wanted to be on a plane every other week. We know some of those people, right? And now, like Clark said, they're looking at things differently. How is that going to affect the future of not only his life, but the business? How's that going to affect things? If I do today, what's going to be that downstream or salmon upstream effect, right, Clark? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's not just saying, oh, okay, well, that's a decision. That's a smart decision. It's an educated decision, right? So let's move on and talk to our Gen X. So Dave, what about you? We called you the lost generation already, and we've given you some defining moments.
I think for us, my generation's 9/11 moment started with the Challenger. That was the first major setback of our generation. Something as fantastic as space exploration resulting in just tragic loss. And that it was the first time we really stopped for a second and slowed down. That, we had the rise of MTV, we had the LA riots. They were all kind of big social movements in our time.
Did it define back then where you traveled to?
I'm sorry?
Did it define back then where you traveled to?
No.
Did it define how you did business at all?
No, it opened your eyes to see how the enormity of the world, basically. Just gave you a better vision of the world overall.
How things can change, huh? Real
Quickly.
fast.
Right.
Real fast. Change is the only constant, everybody. The only thing that keeps moving forward every single day, the only thing that does not even respect what you have to say. It's going to happen either way. Can't tell it to stop. It's going to happen. Always. So we go to our baby boomer, Lucretia. Defining moments. I've had a lot of these. I've shared these with my father. We've had a big battle of the culture clashes with the millennials and the boomers. This is one of the reasons I wrote the book, was to talk more and thrive more together with my father, who's a baby boomer. What would you say some of those defining moments were to you, and do you agree with some of the ones that were on the screen?
Yes, I agree with the ones on the screen, and also I think, in my viewpoint, the defining moments were not necessarily it happened today, like 9/11, like Challenger. It was as things changed, the civil rights, the women's rights, and I think that my generation was probably, or the way that I take it, we were the first ones that we had a choice. We could work, or we could stay home, or we could do both. So I think we had choices that maybe the silent generation didn't have.
I agree with that. I heavily agree with that. You know, my Nana used to tell me, she would say, Patrick, when you get out of high school, you can either get into the military or you can go to college. I was like, what? Those are my only two choices? That scared me. I didn't want any of those, right? So, and then moving to the baby boomers, like you said, there were a little bit more choices. There were a little bit more options. A lot of the baby boomers were starting these companies, Baby boomers have been in power for a very long time, and it's the reason is because the silent generation, when they decided to retire, I think it was 55 when they were allowed to, a lot of them did. So it was like, hey, you know what? We're done. We are heading to Florida. Trust me, there's villages everywhere here, and every baby boomer now I see, a lot of them still work today. They own businesses. They're presidents of companies, but you had more choices, right?
Right.
A lot more choices. So look at your workbook, everyone. Go to page 2. Who are the generations? Start to fill some of these out. Start to think of other, I would say, celebrities or people you know. Let's not talk about celebrities. A good buddy of mine always said, if you have time to share a Kardashians post, you have time to share one of our produce posts. And I'm going to keep saying that. So to everybody, write some of the people in your industry in these generations. Who are they? Do you know any of them? Are they here today? Right? Think about some of the people and see if you're right or wrong. Which category do they fall into? And I was behind on my slides, guys. It's okay. So do the workbook. Who's here? Who's not here? And how do we progress together? Which generation do you idolize, right? Hans always used to tell me every time we spoke on the phone, he would say, Patrick, gosh, I'm not the typical boomer. I don't think Lucretia is either. I don't think a lot of boomers are the typical boomer. He goes, I'm an introvert. He goes, but I'm very millennial, man. I want to go snowboarding. I want to go out on Friday nights. I'm sitting there like, who is this guy? I neglected to get to know a generation just because I had a few bad interactions with them. We can say we've done that, right? We can say that. Mason, we can say we've had bad interactions with another generation. It puts a taste in your mouth. Ugh. I don't want to manage someone who's older than me. Ugh. I don't want to manage someone who's younger than me. They'll never listen. They'll always be on their phones. Trust me, we can go on. We can go on and on. But again, these are generalizations, everyone, too. Generalizations that plague our workforce every single day. And we talk a little bit about why does this matter and what about the generalizations. There is plenty of opportunity. And we've done some studies with multiple businesses in the supply chain industry, and there's about $250 billion that we could find of opportunity on the table in the produce and supply chain industry that is untapped at this point because we're still living some of these generalizations. Oh, we don't want these people to travel. Oh, we want this to happen this way. Oh, we still have a dress code. Like, what are we talking about here? Why does this matter? Well, some of this stuff is culture clashing. Some of these things, like I said, even tattoos, still gets brought up within HR. Still gets brought up if you have tattoos, it's a stigma against you. It is. They're sitting there going, oh, great, here we go. What's this guy going to say? Right? They automatically assume something right off the bat, and they shouldn't. But guess what? Tattoos being visible is coming a long way. 42% of millennials have visible tattoos. So it's going to be one of those things where it's just going to happen, and we just embrace culture. And guess what? If they decide to have it, they do. If they decide not to, that's okay as well, right? But there's a lot of opportunity being lost because there are still generalizations that plague that in the workplace. We can go back to John's days and a lot of, I would say, who got tattoos in your days? It would probably be the sailors. It'd probably be people in the army. Who else? Who else can we think of?
Mostly bad people.
Bad people. He said it, not me. Bad people.
That's what it was.
But it was. That's what it was in his generation. So he can only think what he's experienced and what he knows. And then the same going down the baby boomer. It started getting into, people that had tattoos were in clubs or they were in gangs. And then it moved to I'd say the barbed wire on the arm, Dave, right? It moved to a symbol, right? And then the millennial generation, it came into art. And now in the Gen Z, it's really a part of their culture now. But it's still being looked at, and an opportunity gets lost every day. How many boomers are retired versus how many Gen Zs are coming up every single day? Let's start looking on how to leave a legacy, not just to have a legend for one person. Legacy is a lot better than a legend. Legend goes into fairy tales. Legacy still stands to this day, still keeps on moving. So, it does matter. Opportunity lost, higher turnover rates. It affects your bottom line, everybody, and it affects you getting creative and having and starting opportunity. It's true. I mean, if I was growing up in Joe's world, I didn't want to go to college. I didn't want to go into the military, and I have tattoos. Oh, I'm not working for Joe. No way. And Joe's probably looking at me going, I don't trust this guy. But guess what? That's what it was in your era.
It didn't have to be, though.
No, sir.
I mean, I don't think everything was like that.
Agreed. Agreed.
You got to stop, communicate, and do what's best for everybody.
For everyone.
So.
And we've experienced that over the last, I would say, 12 months, haven't we? A little bit more.
Yeah.
The supply chain, a lot of people said it broke down. I think it was really strong. I think that there were parts of it that broke down, but I believe that our supply chain held really strong over 2020, and we're still producing a lot of good food and a lot of good companies for the produce and supply chain industry. So think about why this matters, and think about what you can do to move forward. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about the silent generation. We're going to talk about the generalizations, though. And then we're going to have you come back and tell us if those generalizations are even true or not, okay? Because this is what research likes to say. When they get a bunch of people together like us today and we fill out that nice form, we're able to get a nice collective group together and say, this is what this research says. So we talked about personal values for the silent generation. We talk about long-term thinkers, creating sustainable agriculture for generations to come. We plan ahead multiple times per day and per year because that's what we do. And we conserve what we have to make sure that we are lasting for generations to come. Good personal values is what we found. And the personal message is Joe is loyal and he's humble. Now, his personal attitude could be and is, he built the system, though. That's powerful. That's our silent generation, everybody. Now, I say these statistics do come from the Pew Research Board. We get a lot of these statistics throughout the Pew Research Board, understanding what the generations are doing and getting more surveys on how generations are acting. So, we're going to circle back to Joe, and we'll talk about some of those when we get into the panelists. But that's really, really deep. I mean, some people could say, he could be thinking in his head, that's not me. That's not me. I'm different. I'm different. Who are the other generations? So the baby boomers, what are their personal values? Anti-establishment? Maybe. Don't trust institutions? I'm not sure. What about they make their own way? I've seen that. A lot of companies started from baby boomers. What about I'm in charge? Have we heard that? And what about their personal attitude, which is they took over the system? They took over what the silent generation left to them, and they've been running and building it ever since. A lot of the great corporations and organizations that you see today. We're going to circle back. I know you got some comments. We all do. Because are these the real attitudes, personal values, and messages for the generations? Are they? We're going to find out. We're going to let our panelists talk a little bit and tell us if it's true or false, right? So let's get to our Gen X. I love this, and I think Dave is this guy, but Gen X is the unplug and get real. This is not sunshine and rainbows. Let's get to work and get things done. Stop messing around, okay? Life's not going to just be here for you. You got to work for it. And they're loyal, very loyal. They're very scrappy, and they're not sorry. Not one bit. And one of the other things they like to do, they like to avoid the system. They're going to figure out how to get it done. There's going to be a specific way to get it done. But those parameters might work, so they might have to avoid that system to create what's going to work and what's going to be more efficient. And let's go to millennials, Mr. Clark Roper. Change the world. I could see that. Environment, duh. We got to have sustainability. Always. How about this one, Clark? We can do it. Let us do it. Oh, man. I'm awesome. Yes, I am. I'm awesome. Well, we can say that. And then personal attitude, work within the system. Don't avoid it. Don't start a new one. Work within it to make things happen. Clark, I know you got some good feedback for me on that one, and we're going to circle back to you, of course. And then Gen Z, everyone. This is going to be great about Gen Z, is that we are aware. And I'm going to show you how aware Gen Z is when we get to the consumer population in 2026. We're going to get there, okay? But Gen Z, savvy and evaluate everything. Watching, always watching, okay? And they're very fluid. Their schedules are fluid. Their lives are fluid. Don't have kids. Not married. Sounds like a dream job to me. Mason has a dream job. Okay? And then, last but not least, is work around the system. So there's work within the system. There was avoid the system. Create the system. Now it's work around the system. These are a lot of good generalizations. Or are they facts? So let's circle back. Mr. Joe McGee, let's talk about some of these. Were these generalizations or were these facts about the silent generation?
Probably some of both.
Okay. So when you say probably some of both, do you feel like some of these don't define you just as an individual or as the generation?
Well, you know, I think we tend to change over a period of time, and I've had a long time to change. So I think the change comes about, you know, yeah, bad people had tattoos, yeah, but, you know, that changes.
Yeah.
So you got to adapt and work with people to change.
That I agree with. And we've had a lot of changes over the last year. Now, get your workbook back out, because there's a technology page out there. Flip to the technology page. And this is a question we're going to go down the line as well and ask the most important question that everybody's really wondering. And it's about Zoom. Okay? Everybody's wondering about it. Everybody's asking about it. But where are we at with this? Do we want to keep doing Zoom calls, or do we want to go back to phone calls? What do you think, Joe?
I think it's going to change. I think there's going to be more and more of the Zoom calls. I'm not saying that we'll get all away from phone calls, but it's going to change. It already has changed. And it's going to be a part of our normal business anymore.
That's powerful. How many times have you heard him say change? I'm not just telling you to change. Joe's been in the industry a long time. He's seen a lot of changes. He built the system, built some of the companies that we probably do business with today, too. So change is a good thing. You might not believe it right now, but we will get you to believe it by the end, at least tomorrow. We'll get to believe tomorrow. We won't even put a stipulation on it today. Okay? So Lucretia, let's move down to you. We talk about the Zoom versus the phone call. You started off with phone calls. So phone calls, faxing. I remember before the pandemic, I tried to get people on Zoom calls and they laughed at me. They were like, no, we're not, our company doesn't do that. Why would we do that? And now it's becoming an everyday thing where now it's like when someone wants to get a hold of you, they send you a Zoom message and you're like, they don't know I'm traveling or I'm driving, but that's fine. And it's the first question we get asked when you don't set up a Zoom call now, right, Lucretia? It's like, hey, why are you, everything okay?
Right.
So what is it? Would you rather go Zoom or rather go phone call?
I think with me personally, and I'm not speaking for my whole generation, but I think personally, and especially in the produce industry that changes so fast, you know, that a phone call is a lot less cumbersome than maybe a Zoom. And there may be situations when you do want to do Zoom because you want to share more information with a larger group or whatever, but one-on-one, pick up the phone.
I agree with you.
It's quicker.
Yeah.
It still holds true to this day. Trust me. I talk to a lot of upcoming sales managers where they always say, well, I emailed them and I texted them. I was like, yeah, did you call them? And he was like, well, I emailed them and texted them. I'm like, that's not the same thing. I'm like, there is still a thing called voicemail. Listen, you're allowed to do it. Things change, though. So we got to adapt all the time, okay? We have to. So look at some of the technology that has changed us over the last year and how many people are trying to get us involved in some of this technology. But what about the generalizations that we talked about, these personal messages, these values? Do you feel those to be true about your generation?
Yes, and in that, like anti-establishment, I was on the lesser end of like the Vietnam War, but that was a very defining thing that happened to the baby boomers. And I think that there are still questioning about the war. So therefore, who sent you to war? And I can see why there would be anti-establishment. But what is funny is that the hippies, you know, the checkout, now they're the ones that are like back to the earth, you know, grow your own food, things of that nature. So it's like the pendulum has swung. So really, I don't think there's any straight and narrow. It just boils down to respect.
I think it's right. I think it does. I think a lot of things boil down to respect. But we also seem to think that the younger generation should respect their elders, though. Right? All day, every day, right? They should just respect their elders. So there's a two-way street here, right?
Absolutely.
Very big crossing coming up. Because as I believe, and I'll say this to anybody, that the generation after me is way smarter than me. I'm going to be looking for Mason to tell me what to do next. When we go and look at each generation, we start to believe on how things roll. Okay, we need a mentor in this space. Well, the last thing I'm going to do is go to someone that's not an expert in that space. So I go to find to the younger generation and say, hey, if you were to do this, what would you do? They're going to tell you. They're always evaluating, right? So let's take a second, though, as you look between those two generations and those messages between those two generations. There was a lot of conflict between them, right? Workspace and workplace, which we figured out in 2020 was a lot different, right? Schedules and priorities, dress and body art. Heck, we talked about that a little bit, didn't we? Technology as well. And then marriage and family, right? All these things you could bring into the workplace that are staple in the workplace, right? All those have to be in queue for you to have a happy life, right? So as we move to the next generation, Dave, Gen X, those personal values, those messages. What do you think, man?
As far as the Zoom calls, it's the benefits, body language, you know, reading somebody's facial expressions, but at the same time, it's somewhat intrusive. And we didn't have time to digest the current situation or the pandemic, and we're just forced right into it.
True.
We're now raising kids from home. We're teachers. We're sharing offices with our spouses. There's dogs. That's a lot of chaos to manage when you're on a Zoom call and there's nowhere to go. So there's pluses and minuses to both, but you have to find the balance within each.
Used to be able to close the office door, huh?
Absolutely.
The office door is sometimes the bedroom door or a bathroom door you got to close in the background, I started realizing. Someone's like, what's that door behind you? And I'm like, oh, crap. You know, these are things we've got to change and adjust to, right? Each generation, we're learning something different. Clark, as a millennial, we've seen a lot of change. Heck, I remember having typewriter classes when I was in 6th and 7th grade, and I asked my niece the other day, who's 13, I said, do they still do HTML coding classes in high school? And do you guys still do, keyboard? And she was like, Uncle Pat, you're old. And I was like, what? I was like, what are you talking about? And she's like, they don't do that. They don't do that stuff. Now, maybe some schools do, but hers does not. And that blew my mind because those were some of our electives. We had a lot of change. Do you agree with some of these personal messages, these values, and then the Zoom versus the phone call?
Yeah, so I wrote down when you said we want to change the world, I don't think there's anything that's probably more that could be generalized that's maybe true about our generation than that. I mean, you see it in marketing, starting with Tom's shoes, right? Like, I mean, never would have thought I would have connected buying a pair of shoes with changing the world, but, we really are driven and we thrive from that understanding of what we do matters. And, speaking to the people in this room, we have an incredibly easy sell, right? So any of the organizations that we're with, you have the easiest pitch in the world. We make everybody's life healthier and better. So I definitely agree with the making the world better one. Zoom, I think it has a lot of benefit when you can return people's time back to them, right? So as opposed to having to drive across town to a meeting or fly out somewhere and those people get to be home that night instead and spend time with their families, I think that's phenomenal. But personally, I'm more of an AirPods guy, get on a phone call, and that way I can, make the bed, go on a walk, do a little bit of multitasking. Like you were saying, Dave, it's a little less invasive. So I think it has its place, but I'm personally more of a phone call guy.
I get it. You know how many times I've talked to people on their treadmills in the last year? And it's like, you're like, working out? Like, yeah, I'm on the treadmill. I'm like, okay, so his schedule between 10 and 11 is on the treadmill. Like, we start to realize these things. Before, I remember when I wrote my book, Hans and I were talking. I was on a phone call one day, and, a gentleman, very nice, I'm not going to name his name, and, he heard my baby crying in the background, and he was like, oh, are you at home? I was like, yes. This is like 2012, everyone, right? It was historic to some people at this point. And 2012, right? My baby was crying. He was like, oh, just call me when you get back on the clock. Just call me when you get back on the clock. And I was like, I'm confused at this point because I'm like, am I on the clock? Should I get off the clock? Like, I'm just like, no, I'm working from home. This is what it is, right? And now it's like, go to Gen Z, they're looking at this experience that I talk about, and they're going, wow, that's crazy. Someone would say that to you? Right, Mason? It's like no one goes to think. So we look at your personal values and your messages off of that comment. Are those true about you, your generation? And would you rather have a Zoom or a phone call?
I think some of the generalizations about my generation are true for sure. I do think that a lot of older generations think we're tied to and dependent on technology. And I think that's something that as more of my generation comes into the workplace, hopefully we can kind of squash that generalization. I do think that we're resourceful in the sense that we, like I said, came up with that technology and it's kind of second nature to us. And a lot of older generations, I think, consider us kind of entitled because we're sure of and confident about our abilities with technology, but I definitely don't think we're dependent on it. I think, like I said, as more of us come into the workplace, you'll see that we have those social skills too. We're not going to walk up to you with our phone in our face. And I was laughing with Clark beforehand. I said, are you taking your phone up there? And he said, no, I think I'm going to leave it out with my wife. And I said, yeah, we wouldn't want to confirm our generalizations. So neither one of us have our phones on stage, just to throw that out there. But as far as Zoom or a phone call, I definitely think there's a place for each. And from a convenience standpoint, absolutely a phone call. You don't have to sit down. You don't have to put makeup on unless you have a Zoom call afterwards. So you save some time there. But I think, and for me, I kind of have a unique perspective because I started my position right before the pandemic started. So a lot of our customers and our partners I met for the first time over Zoom calls. And if those had just been phone calls, I wouldn't feel like I had that connection to the same extent. But I do know for several of us that have been in the industry and involved with councils like this for so long, I think being able to see our friends and our partners face to face, so to speak, I think it's kind of helped us weather the pandemic emotionally and mentally to be able to maintain those connections. So I think Zoom calls are very special from that perspective.
That was powerful. A lot to learn from each generation. We don't think so in everyday work, right? We don't think so. We don't think that we need to change right away. How many of us go into work working towards change or working against it every single day? I mean, it's 50-50. You're either going against it every single day and trying not to change, or you're the other person going, all right, are we moving forward? Are we doing this? Hey, how are we doing? Let's do this. Which one are you? And not either one of them is bad, because change is coming either way. It'll happen sooner or later, whenever it's ready. But each generation has something to give to the next generation and to the ones that come before it. What it does is it demands a higher generational intelligence. Each generation passes that intelligence to the next generation. So we have to keep that legacy going. Not the legend, the legacy. Okay? So have we convinced you about change at all? Because that was our goal, is to let you know that change is a good thing and how to thrive together, not just in life, but in work too. So, estimated U.S. population by 2026. We talked about the millennials and the boomers being the largest of those generations. Guess what? Gen Z is now up to 82 million in population, meaning that millennials and Gen Z are the largest populations now. Who's the thing of the past? The two generations that we thought were the largest, but guess what? The most knowledgeable generations. So now what we have to do is combine all 5 working generations that are here today and thrive together in life and work. Because we have 43 million of this Gen Alpha that's coming up, which is my kids, that are smarter than all of us already. They've got the most buying power in the house. Because when they walk in the grocery store, they're like, I want that, I want that, I want that, I want that. And you're like, why the heck would you buy that? Why would you do that, right? So they now have the buying power, and as Gen Zs and millennials, we're the largest generations. So now we have to look to the education, the knowledge of what the older generations have, and work with Gen X and all the generations that are upcoming to help build and change. So, what do we do? It's very simple, everyone. It's condemn or collaborate. That's it. And that's the truth. You can either get on board or not. Some say, some of these baby boomers, Joe, they're going to go down fighting all the way. All the way they're going to go down fighting. And you know what? And others say, we hope they do. Because they're just generalizations. But what can we do moving forward, looking at each generation as we pass? So, condemn or collaborate, everyone. Write it down, circle it, it's in there, condemn or collaborate. So, last but not least, I'm going to leave you with a nice fun story, and then we'll get into our Q&A. In 2012, I went to go see a band, so I have this picture up there. I'm in the middle, long hair, no beard. Really interesting look I had at the time. My wife hated that look. People thought I was a hippie. Lucretia, they would tell me, cut your hair. That's not professional. What are you doing looking like that? But this picture is not about me, and it's not about the band. It's about the other person that's in there. So in 2013, that gentleman was my CFO for my organization. His aunt had just died. He is an immigrant from South Korea. He spent a lot of time here. I met him in high school. He's a citizen of the United States now. And man, he just went through a bad time, everyone. Bad time. Everything in work was going down. Clark, he was getting rejections every day. Work sucked. Aunt just died. Boss was not nice at all at those times. And, you know, I decided to do something for him. And I said, let's go see this band. I know it's your favorite band. So we went, we called one of our friends. They got us backstage tickets to go hang out with the band. And the lead singer, Jihun, was so excited. And he runs up to the lead singer and he goes, "Oh my God, why'd you cut your hair?" Like, first question, like, favorite band, that's what you're gonna ask, right? And he, "Why'd you cut your hair?" The guy looks and says, "Change is a good thing, brother. Tell you what, I knew it back then, the change was good, but from 2013 on, when I saw the look in Jihun's eyes, when I saw the look that, my favorite band telling me that change is a good thing, I started to realize that change is a good thing, everyone." So I want to thank all of our panelists today. We're going to get into some Q&A, and I want to thank everybody for coming and enjoying the education session. So thank you.
I am going to kick us off first with a question from some of our virtual garden guests. So the first question, and none of these are specific to any one panelist, so go ahead and jump in where you guys feel free. How did each of you take on the pandemic, and how are you planning for post-pandemic?
What was the second half, please?
So how each of you took on the pandemic and how you are planning for post-pandemic. Something for things like the, work from home, how you've structured your life, things like that.
I'd actually love to hear from Mr. Joe on this one and hear your take on where you're going to take the organization.
Well, it's so uncertain right now. The only thing you can be certain of is change, like we've been talking about to some extent. But you have got to act quickly and be ready to do what you have to do to survive. So,
I'll jump in. For us, I think we had a very set culture, and we always have, and that's one of our strengths, but can also be one of our downfalls when you look at those types of things. So this really shook us up this year. It forced us to use some Zoom calls. We were in person a lot just from the nature of what we do, but with suppliers, just trying to get space within the actual organization. Meetings for directors, those types of things. We moved some of those things to Zoom, and I think it's going to enhance our communication moving forward. I really do. It's that healthy dose of mixing those things in together. So during the pandemic, we had to kind of scramble, and there was an uncertainty in time of trying to figure out how we were going to find that balance. But I think we've got a better idea that just a dash of these things where they're most effective and not a heavy dose one way or the other moving forward is going to be helpful to us.
I think from our perspective, it's like anything else. You evolve with it. Nobody was prepared for it. Nobody was ready for it. But you make do with what you have. You find a way. Here's the problem. Let's work on the solution. And that solution is going to continue to evolve as it goes on.
I think that, like we said, it came all at once. And, and I step back and I still have a problem comprehending how quickly, how fast that thing shut down. But yet, with produce, you can't turn it off. You can't turn that switch off. So we had to find a way to work, communicate, and still get the goods out to our customers. And it took change on everybody's part, all the way from how we work at our farms to how our drivers interact with the warehouses.
A lot of change. A lot of change.
Do we have any questions from the audience here?
So things are moving faster and faster, especially as these newer generations are coming up, and technology makes that move so much quicker. And a lot of us are in these big, huge corporations, and they don't move fast. Any insight on what you might be doing in your company to help make that change go quicker for these generations that are coming up? How do you make sure that you're taking care of that consumer?
So one thing we're working on right now is implementing some of these things like Teams and these technological pieces. And really our strategy is going to be, let's make it attractive and draw people to it. And it's a long-term play, right? So I mean, we're trying to educate, but we're not trying to walk in and tell everybody, this is what you're going to use, this is how you're going to use it. Make it happen. So, specifically to get in with Teams, we've found that people enjoy using like the chat feature. And so kind of drawing people in that way, just allowing them to have conversations and make their life easier. And then they start to see the benefit, and then they start to implement it on their own. Develop content like things you would normally put on your company intranet, develop content that draws them to that place. So that's kind of our strategy, is to try to make it attractive and draw people to it. And then along the way, we'll start kind of easing the people that we know we're going to have some more pushback on it.
No running.
Big room. Probably about 15 years ago, we saw technologies that were video conferencing, most notably Skype and some others, and they started being used and kind of fell out of disuse. So why would say Skype in 2005 didn't really catch on to do the video thing, and Zoom will have staying power after we all get our shots?
I think now we don't have a choice. Back then we had a choice. I think everybody that's in this industry knows how important that personal relationship is, that personal interaction. I think we all thrive for it. It's, so given the circumstances now where we have to use it, I think that's the difference maker.
Building off that question, one that we got from the virtual garden is, do you think technology will have an impact on workforce and workforce reductions? Are new skill sets required, or is this still a people business?
That's a fascinating question, especially it's both, especially for our industry. We are so people-oriented. I think we've seen technology step in, and it started to pull some of those things away. Some of those relationship pieces. Especially even from the buying in, a lot of things are a lot more focused on the numbers. And as we get more efficient, how do we balance people and numbers and those things back and forth? I think technology is just as good as we can make it useful to us. And you have to look at the overall value, not just the bottom line. You have to look at the big picture of what's valuable to you and what's going to be valuable to you long run. So those relationships, I loved what Mason said earlier about, sometimes we can be seen as tied to our phones, but they're really, we're tied to our phones because they're great tools. Honestly, I can't speak for you, but for me personally, I love using things with technology because it helps me get things back in my life in other ways that I want to retrieve. So if I can be more efficient in my time, I'll have more time at home that evening, right? So I'm glued to my phone because I'm trying to get more personal time back, and I think that can be a misconception. So how that fits into the marketplace and these enterprises it'll be interesting.
I'm interested to hear in what how much of it is the carrot and how much of it is the stick. You mentioned Teams. We had a conversation with our team about, don't text me, please call me. Don't leave me a voicemail, please send me an email. But at what point do you draw the line and say, this is it, we're not having a fax machine anymore, and it's time to move on? I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. So let me get back to you in a year when we figure it out. Right now that's our strategy, and that timeline is going to be very dependent upon how effective we are with the carrot before we have to start looking at stick. And so balancing those two is going to be interesting. But I just think people are more motivated to do things naturally that are beneficial to them, as opposed to, there has to be a balance of both. And there's going to be people, even departmentally, when we've tried it on small scales, we've had people that weren't necessarily against implementation, but they just didn't want to see the value in it. They wanted to do things the way they've always done them. And so those will always be challenges. There will never be in my opinion, just all carrot. I think that's a false reality. But we're going to try to use as much carrot to get the people that can be drawn that way there, so we can keep the morale behind the project high, and then we'll start to explore options on when that hard cutoff date may be. But we're trying to lead our people to a place as opposed to force them to go somewhere.
Well, to add on that too is, talk to your people. Don't tell them. Ask them what they like, what they don't like about it. They're going to tell you, trust me. So that's also to go off of, you don't have to change that right away. Yes, we can implement a plan to change it, but ask them, why don't you like it that way? Why would you rather text? Why would you rather email? Because they're going to tell you that everyone wants to talk. Everyone's going to tell you their advice. They're going to tell you what their opinion. They're going to tell you, and you know what? You have to filter through that to figure out what really matters. And like Clark said, he's trying to get more efficient. All of us are in certain ways, while also getting back some of that personal time. So ask questions to your people. Ask them what they like and what they don't like.
Tell Clark he needs to do it quick, because the older you get, the further you fall behind.
Falling every day.
It moves so fast now. It's amazing how, we as a company, I think we, embrace the technology and so forth. But how personally, me trying to keep up is unbelievable how fast it changes.
Oh, I agree.
Our final question here is from Harold, our SEPC chairman, who unfortunately wasn't able to join us, and also our education co-chair. So I want to wrap up with a question from him virtually, is when stuff hits the fan at work, what generation do you seek for help or advice, older or younger?
What hit the fan? What part of the operations, right? Sales, marketing, buying, which one? Let's see. I'll start with this, and I'm gonna lead it off to one of the panelists, or multiple of them. I take everything as a situational approach now. My leadership goes back to transformational leadership, where I transform myself to each individual employee, understand them, have empathy for them, have sympathy for them. So in my neck of the woods, I would always go to the baby boomers. I would transition myself to know, well, they're the ones who started the company. I know they're going to have the answers. They're the decision maker. And that's what we're trying to find out, is trying to get that decision, right? That's what we're really trying to find out. So I think it's very situational in what department, where you're at, right? Who's doing what. Don't always think that a millennial knows what they're doing in IT. Right, Clark? I know how to use my iPhone, but you bring an Android even near me, I will break it, okay? I will break this thing. I can't do little sliding passwords and stuff. You guys are crazy with those Androids. But you know what I mean? So I would go to the baby boomers. But as a Gen X, though, who would you seek an advice?
Again, as you said, it's situational. You can learn from both sides of the spectrum. So there's always something you can learn from the people before you, and there's more you can learn from the people after you.
Okay.
It's like parenting. You listen to your parents forever, and all of a sudden you become the parent. You learn more about parenting from the child.
Yes.
And I think that's the key, is never stop learning. We can learn from anyone. And so, a piece from here, a piece from there. In other words, there's no right answer.
Right? Hans tells me all the time, you know what he says? He goes, the day you grow old is the day you stop learning.
Absolutely.
Simple. It's very simple. You're allowed to grow old, you can be old. But always learn, right?
Got to.
Pat, I'd jump in on that. I think it's whoever's going to score, right? Like you want the ball in the hands of your playmaker, and I think that's kind of what I would love to, continue to learn. And a great takeaway for me from here is not looking across the generation and having assumptions, because I think even in our own company, we've got younger people that when something goes south, I want this person taking care of this, and then you've got some people that, hey, I need the experience. I need somebody that's been there before. But in pandemic, nobody's been there before. So who do you rely on that you know is going to score, right? Yeah. So it's just a matter of getting to know your people and understanding their strengths and weaknesses, and then identifying that person, regardless of the generation, to me.
I agree. Clark wanted to say, he's like, who's expendable and who's not? We'll figure this out, right? And it is. It's just trying to figure that out.
Absolutely. So let's give our panelists and Patrick a round of applause. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here this morning. I know the early morning session's not the easiest to get to, as well as our virtual attendees. I apologize. We also had some more great questions from them that we didn't have a chance to get to. At the close of the session here, I'm going to ask you guys to please leave the room. They're going to do a sanitization between now and the next session. So please go out and enjoy some refreshments from our sponsors. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You did great.
Enjoyed it.